Hello, this is a response to my frustration at not being able to teach in person. The research grid assignment, that's what I'm going to call it, exam 3, research grid. The results could have been better, and I don't think it's you guys. I think it's these circumstances. If we had been going through it in person, I think they would have been better. But we're not, so I'm going to go through the exam 4 prompt step by step with some side discussion here and there. So yeah, it's an exam. It really is. It sounds like a paper. It's in the paper format. Yes, it is. But it's an exam because what you're doing is showing that you understand what you've learned. That's the key. You learned a bunch of stuff, or you didn't. And then you show that you learned a bunch of stuff, or you didn't. And you show that you understood it by applying it to something, to some particular problem. It's a research class, so you're doing a research proposal. You're showing you understand how to write a research proposal, which means you understand how to plan research. My advice would be if you got some serious feedback that you didn't like, go through the lectures. Maybe go through every lecture to make sure that you're on track for understanding every item in this prompt. I know you've done summaries. I get the sense that many of you haven't seen all the video lectures, and that's fine if you understand something. But if you don't, you might want to go back to them. It might be worth the time. You can see stuff in YouTube at 1.25 or 1.5 speed. You don't have to stick with my speed. I think I explained things better in them or added something to the reading, so check them out. Okay, what is a proposal? Again, what's a proposal? Really simple. The underlying structure, the skeleton of a proposal, is two parts. There's a problem and a solution. And I'm going to mention this again because I think a lot of you think that a proposal assignment in college is something you can load and dump. You can do it and you can forget it. You can say to yourself, well, that was bullshit, but I got through the assignment, I got a grade, I'm out of here. No, you don't know if you're going to be writing a grant proposal in a job you get 3 years from now or 5 years from now. Don't know if you'll be writing an internal proposal to your boss, or if you'll be responding to what's called an RFP, a request for proposals, by some other company. The problem in business or government or even in nonprofits may be stated very quickly, and the solution may not be stated quickly, that most of the proposals devoted to the solution. That's not true in government. In academia, that's more like half and half. But still, the underlying skeletal structure of any proposal is problem, and we have a solution. So in business, not enough money. If you go to this website, this URL, pause this, type it into another tab or another browser, and you scroll down a little, scroll down, I don't know, page down 3 or 4 times, you'll see one of their business proposal templates say the problem and the solution. And I found that after I wrote this lecture. They think that way. If a company or a government puts out what is called an RFP, a request for proposal, if you get into middle management in government or business, you will hear the phrase, the acronym RFP. And the RFP, the request for a proposal, outlines the problem. And your proposal needs to show you understand the problem. And you spend most of your time on the solution, but the first page or two, the first 3 pages need to show you understand their problem. Same thing in government. The problem in business is not enough money. You're not making money. You're losing money, whatever that problem is. Problem in government is the policy isn't working. The public isn't better off. Public welfare, public good worsens or isn't what it could be. Solution, here's a new policy or a change in the current policy. Nonprofit sector. there's some social problem. There's homelessness, there's teen pregnancy, there's drug addiction, whatever. They need a solution. There's a clear problem and a solution. Or the social service agency needs a new way to address it, a new way to raise funds, a new way to do something. Um, in academia, the problem is always we don't know enough. The problem is always about knowledge and our lack of it. We know a lot, but we don't know everything. We can always say that about pretty much anything. There's always more to know. And the solution is always going to be more research. So, a research proposal is structured that way. Literature review, the problem. Research design, the solution. The problem is this is what other people don't know, and this is what they don't know. This is what other people do know, and this is what they don't know. You lay out what they do know, and then you start poking holes in it. Like, they know this, but they don't know that. Or they all think they know this, and they all disagree with each other. So the main problem in a literature is either there's a gap, there's something missing, they don't know everything, or they disagree. They think they know, and the people down the street think they know, and the people up the street and the people down the street disagree. It's a disagreement or it's a gap. That's the problem. And a research design is, here's how I'm going to start answering the question. I'm going to find out stuff. The cool kids in academia find out the coolest stuff. A research design is a plan for finding out the answer. So, your exam 4, which you're doing Friday, you're turning it in later this week. Today's Tuesday. Yes, I really wanted this to get this way earlier. Oh my God. And yes, the deadline on Friday night is, I really don't want to say this, but it's true. It's kind of soft. Email me to ask for a, 12-hour extension or 24-hour extension if you're desperate. Try not to do that, but if you have to, let me know. Exam 4 puts together everything you've done. You've done exam 2. You did a literature review draft. And now you revise it with my comments and you discuss 5 more sources, either more articles or more books. Most of you are going to find articles, especially with libraries being shut down. 1 or 2 of you might find an ebook and you want to cite a chapter in an ebook. Great. But you're going to go mostly with articles. That's fine. And exam 3, you did that grid. Okay, that becomes the skeleton of the other half, the solution, your research design for this paper. You take what you did, you revise it with my comments, and you add to it along with this prompt. So my advice would be pull up the prompt right now, have 2 screens, one's in YouTube, one's in MS Word, and read along. Use 2 screens. All right. Title page. I let this go. I started saying snarky things about the first 2, 3, 4. Like, oh my God, you're so generic. After a while, I realized I didn't push you to be specific. My bad. So I didn't take off for it. But you do need practice. And yeah, next semester when I teach this again, the titles are going to be specific from the get-go. You need to have your title for exam 4 be very specific. Is this about traffic stops? Is this about redlining? Is this about why racism in general? Is this about sociology majors? Is it about sociology minors? The title should tell people. The whole thing about not judging a book by its cover, false. We need at least to have a preliminary judgment about whether to even read the thing. You judge a book by its cover by what the cover says, words, the title. The title should draw you in. Yeah, I want to read this. No, I don't want to read this. So if people want to know about sociology majors and you write traffic stops, they'll tell themselves, yeah, I don't need to read that. That's not my field. Be specific in your title. Introduction. I seem to be really, really petty about this, but an introduction is where you grab the reader. Fine. They read your title. Okay, this is about the topics I'm interested in. Is it any good? The first sentence better talk about them. I said this, and I said this, and I said this, and so many of you ignored it. You talked about you. You talked about your research. My project will be, no, 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 no. Don't do that. Please, don't do that. If you go into a business and you talk about us, we're great. Honestly, they don't give a shit. There's some business, they want to pay you money, and in return, you're going to give them a solution to their problem. Start with their problem. So in academia, right now, practice. Start with the problem. Not you, not your research, traffic stops, redlining, segregation, colorblind racism, white talk, whatever it is, why people pick a major. That should be the first sentence. You should not, the word me or mine or my should not be in that sentence. The word research should not be in that sentence. The topic should be in that sentence. Okay. Why does the issue matter? You can actually, you shouldn't say this issue matters because. And a lot of you did that. It's really clunky writing. But what you could do, you've got a word processor. This is not written by hand. This is not typed like I was doing in the 80s in college. You've got a word processor. Type out, this topic is important because, and then give your justification. Then go back and remove, this topic is important because. Just get yourself started. I bet you will find that once you have the answer, removing the phrase, this is important because, won't change it. In fact, it'll read a little bit better. Just use it as a technique to get you started. Okay, have a sentence on what other researchers know and don't know, what they say about this and what they don't say about this. Either the disagreement or the gap. Then the fourth sentence should be, okay, since there's a gap or there's a disagreement, mostly a gap. In your papers, there's mostly a gap, and that's fine. You should say, therefore, because there's this gap, here's my question. This logically raises the question, and I think you should put this in question format with a question mark at the end. I'm a firm believer in that. That format, which seems, again, like bullshit, actually, I think, will force you to think through the substance of your issue. What do I really want to know? Fifth sentence, research plan. You just say something like, therefore, I will propose a qualitative project based on interviews. I will propose a quantitative project based on secondary data, a quantitative project based on quantitative survey data. Whatever it is, it's just one sentence. And then the sixth sentence of the introduction, yes, I'm spending a lot of time in the introduction, should be a roadmap. Roadmaps are, this is how this whole thing is structured. This is what you're going to see. Do it in one sentence. Yes, I really do want an overview of the paper. It's very standard in sociology and in many other social sciences. You even see historians do it, but damn, they do it way better than we do. They are much more subtle. I envy their writing. They're great. History envy. I read a lot of history. I'm a historical sociologist. So elegant. Okay, so here you are, revising exam 2. It's half of your final paper. You're going to use what you already have. You're going to revise it. And believe me, adding 5 sources is going to make you revise it anyway. Then you can revise it further in line with my advice. And again, what you want to do is structure it in terms of themes. And I'm going to go all Tom Gershik on you. Themes need topic sentences. That's how the reader identifies that you've come up with a new theme, and it's clear. Some of you really were not clear about your themes. You all had Tom, and he loves to beat up on topic sentences over and over and over until you hate him and you're sick of it. You told me this. Successive 271s have told me this. Sorry, he's right. This is not Tom being a cranky old man. And I think he's going to turn 60 pretty soon. So I mean, I'm 58, and he's like a year to 2 years older than me. So I could call him a cranky old man. You know what? No, he's not. He's teaching you good academic writing. If you don't use topic sentences in the rest of your writing, fine. Academic writing, you need topic sentences. He's absolutely right. And I would love to see more of you use topic sentences to identify the 2 or 3 or 4 themes you find in the literature. The first sentence in each paragraph should say what the entire paragraph is about. One of the themes should be theory, and you need 2 citations, theories in the field. At the very least, a theory talks about a relationship between 2 phenomena in the world. Usually, however, it does really address causation. It goes after the issue of why, cause and effect. Why? Because, cause. I pointed out, for some of you, causation was lurking. You would even say, no, I'm not addressing causation. And I pointed out, actually, I think causation is lurking in here. Given the way you've stated it, yeah, it's there. And so you need to think about this. You need to think about theory, and are the theories in your particular field about causation or just some sort of relationship? Also, I will say this. You are not allowed to use symbolic interactionism, conflict theory, or structural functionalism. Oh my God, if I ever hear another undergraduate use those 3 together, I'm going to have a stroke. First of all, they're on different levels of analysis, and the whole goddamn profession across the United States teaches them together wrong. Second, the whole purpose of theory is to understand a given thing in the world. So, racism. I mean, if you were going to take 300 with somebody else, you might be looking at sexism instead. You might be looking at, with Aaron Pitlock, you might be looking at economic development. You might be looking at any number of things. You're taking with Frank, you're looking at some aspect of racism. You're taking with Maria, you're looking at some aspect of sociology majors. Your theory should be a theory from the field of race and racism research. Your theory should be from educational research, and especially sociology major research, not symbolic interactionism, functionalism, or conflict theory. You need to find a couple of citations, a couple of articles that express the theories in the field. So theory is also abstract. It's stated without examples. It's stated without anything concrete. It's stated without data. Just broad general statements. That's when you can recognize theory. And so I say, and I provide you with the URL in the paper prompt. If you're confused, rewatch Thomas Flight's What Does Science Say About Spoilers? He does a good job. I really like this video, and I was very surprised to just run across it accidentally like 2 years ago. He says there are 3 different theories in communications about people consuming media and their satisfaction with it. And he shows how the researchers use those theories to try to understand whether spoilers increase or decrease satisfaction when you're reading a book, you're watching a movie, you're watching a TV show, whatever it is. If you know what's the ending, does that help or does it spoil? That's what his video is about. Great video. You can then look at theories of race or theories of major choice and explain what those are as one of the themes in the literature. Now, the next issue, Roman numeral 6 here, is not going to give you advice on the writing. It's going to give you the why behind the next advice I'm going to give. The next advice is Roman numeral 7. But if you go and skip ahead to Roman numeral 7, you're going to be baffled. Stay with me here. This was a major problem with many research grid assignments, the ones I just graded. You had incompatible aspects of your research design. I showed this to you about 2 months ago. There are 2 basic epistemological approaches in sociology and really in the social sciences. One's positivism, one's constructionism. And they originate in ontology. You have assumptions about what's real. People are fundamentally bodies. People are animals. That's a very materialistic approach. No, people are very cultural. Animals don't have culture the way people have culture. Culture is huge in humans. That's a very idealist ontology. The problem is that the ontological assumptions lead to epistemological assumptions. You are looking for general explanations, therefore you're a positivist, therefore you're going to probably stick with deductive thinking. Hey, I have an idea, let's test it out. That's deductive thinking. You're going to use the language of causation and variables. You're generally, sometimes you're going to use non-probability sampling. This is the one where there's some wiggle room, but you're going to do your best to do probability sampling. You're always going to think about that first if you're a positivist. And you're very likely to collect numbers, quantitative data, and you're very likely to apply inferential statistics to test your hypothesis. If you are an idealist, if you think ideas are hugely important in human society, you're going to get much more specific in your explanation. You're going to be a constructionist. You're going to skip this whole, hey, I have an idea, let's test it. You're not going to do that. You're going to be inductivist. You're going to think, let's go with an open mind. Let's look at the data, then come to conclusions. You're going to think about and use the language of context, culture, interconnectedness. You're almost never going to use probability sampling if you're a constructionist. Almost never. You're almost always going to use qualitative data. You're going to collect it, you're going to analyze it. And you're going to take this approach of looking at the data through coding really intensively and move from very concrete statements, very concrete observations. So let's say you're interviewing, those will be statements. If you're a participant observer, you'll be observing and writing down. But either way, you're going to move from stuff you saw and heard to more abstract issues later. Now, this is really important. I got this off of the internet. I just ran into it one day. Yeah, I spent a lot of time procrastinating, and I read very widely. I have these aggregator websites like Miss Selania, if you're all interested. She's out of Kentucky. She's very cool. And it throws me all over the place. And I ran into this one day. And this shows I'm not alone. Going back to the previous screen, I came up with it on my own. You know what? I was on a walk with Mike Daugherty, and yeah, we had our masks on, and yeah, we were 6 feet apart. We're going on walks because we're both starved for human interaction and we're friends. And Daugherty said he came up with the same thing, more or less. Not exactly, but pretty much the same thing. It's not new to me. I'm not a genius for thinking up the screen that you just saw a minute ago. You can see here, they came up with it already. I'm sure other people have come up with this over and over and over. You can, I mean, this thing here says, yes, it's a continuum. Yes, you can use a quasi-positivist approach, or you can use a quasi-constructionist approach. And a few of you, at least 2 of you, suggested a mixed methods approach, maybe 3 or 4 of you. Unfortunately, you've got to be really careful when you do that, when you use mixed methods. You need to be very conscious. And instead, many of you treated this like sort of a mix and match game. Let's pick some from column 1 and some from column 2. No. Once you go down the constructionist path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will. Oh, sorry. I'm not Yoda. Once you go down one of these paths, you should kind of let it dominate your destiny. You should stick to the same path. No mixing and matching. Leave that to the people who've been doing this a while. This is your first project. So go back to the previous screen and make sure every element of what I'm about to talk about in Roman numeral 7 goes only down one of those 2 paths. Stick to your lane. Really, I know that's an insult on the internet that people get all pissed off about. If you're an undergrad, stay in your lane, your constructionist lane or your positivist lane. Go to grad school, then you can start carefully mixing and matching. Eventually it is okay. Not yet. So the whole point of the research grid assignment was to get you started. Now you're started and you've got comments from me, so you should be much more detailed here than in the grid. And I've had students in the past give me 2 paragraphs on the research design. 2 paragraphs. And of course I flunked them. Got a 50 or a 55 on the whole paper. I really expect 10 paragraphs, 10 separate paragraphs. Just so you know, I made a mistake and I skipped the 6th paragraph, so I had to reword this, and I'm not looking for 11 paragraphs, I'm looking for 10 paragraphs. But I'm sure as hell not looking for 2 paragraphs. No, don't do that, or I will flunk you. And I don't want to. I want to send you all on to Social 300. I want you to graduate. So, here are the questions. Here are the paragraphs. State your research question here, because that whole Roman numeral 6, you're not actually going to write any of that. That's to help you think through Roman numeral 7. So the end of the lit review, your next transition is your research question. Okay, given what the literature says, here's my question. State your question. State it as a question, as something with a question mark. Structured interrogatively, as a linguist would put it. Then be very explicit about your epistemological approach. You are going to take a post-positivist or a positivist approach, or no, you're going to really take a constructionist approach to this topic. And, explain why. Then, units of analysis. Okay, there was some confusion about this. Maybe that's my bad. Let's clear it up. Usually you're trying to explain the actions, the mental actions or the physical actions of some social being, a person, or a group acting together, a bunch of people who are all doing the same thing, consciously, trying to coordinate with each other so they all do the same thing. Not just a group, but an organization or a country. That's some social actor. So here you say what you're trying to explain. And what is the level that social being is on? For example, if you're talking about groups, that's mesosocial. And the problem is, I think a lot of you didn't understand the difference between units of analysis and units of observation. A lot of you just said, oh yeah, they're the same. And you left it. And I dinged you for it. Because quite often, when you deal with groups, you get data on individuals, but you're trying to conclude about the group. Why are white people racist? You're going to get data on individual people telling you are, but they all affect each other. There's a group thing going on. So can you, with individual level data, interviews from individual people, come to conclusions about a group? Or, as the book said, are you going to commit a fallacy? So that's what you need to think through with units of analysis and units of observation. What are you trying to explain, and where you're getting your data? What you're trying to explain is the unit of analysis. Where you get your data is the unit of observation. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes they're not. That's when there's a problem. Okay, what kind of data? And you do need to say why you are going to pick one and why you're not going to pick the other. And you can't just say, well, I'm a constructionist and that's what we do. See, you can't really hide behind that screen that I came up with where I said stay in your lane, which really, I'm not trying to insult you when I say that, okay? It's more that you're a beginner. Try this out the first time. Most of you won't keep going, but when you go to grad school, you can start doing interesting things. But you can't hide behind idealist, ideographic, constructionist, inductive. You got to explain why one kind of data. And if you choose quantitative data and you are going for causation, state your hypothesis right here. Yes, right here. Give me your independent variable and your dependent variable. And some of you had like 5 independent variables and 1 dependent variable. And it wasn't always clear what the dependent variable is. What are you trying to explain? So be clear about that right here. And if you're doing qualitative, are you doing interpretation? Are you trying to understand them and interpret them for your understanding? Are you just doing something exploratory because it's pretty new? The next thing is theory and concepts. And which theory do you want to use? There are theories you talked about in the lit review. Okay, which one are you going to use? And remember that paradigms are behind theories. Paradigms are concepts, ideas, expressed in a vocabulary, expressed through words, that allow you to construct a theory. So define or suggest the most important words in the theory, and then operationalize them. In terms of this being an exam, you'll show that you understand this slide. An epistemological approach can be applied to any social issue. You can take any issue and do the left column, the positive materialist, nomothetic, positive, deductivist, causation variables column. You can take any issue and apply idealism, ideographic approach, constructionism, induction to any issue. But theoretical paradigms and theories are always specific. So there's theories of race, there's theories of major choice, theories of sex, there's or gender, theories of sexism, theories of economic development, theories of democracy, whatever it is, theories of how humans interact with animals, if you study animals in society like Marianne Willetts does. It's always, theories are always much more specific. So define the words, the concepts, and then here, operationalize them. Show how you're going to measure them. Then, what is your data collection method? How are you going to go out and collect data that you're measuring? And if you pick qualitative, you're not measuring. If you're picking quantitative, obviously you are measuring. If you're qualitative, you're not going to measure, and you can say, I'm not measuring. That's okay. What sort of method are you doing? Are you going to use, if you're quantitative, are you going to use surveys? Or are you going to use secondary data from the US Census or from the Sociology Department or from ISU? Are you going to use secondary data from somewhere else, from police departments? And if you're doing qualitative data, are you going to do interviews? Are you going to do an open-ended survey, which again, surveys are almost always quantitative, and there are people like Maria Schmeckley who are the exception. You have to say qualitative survey, but you could say that if you want. You're not going to have a perfect project. I'm sorry, you're not. And you don't solve. You just don't. Admit it. Just accept it. You don't solve the problems of validity. You don't solve the problems of reliability. You don't solve the problems of authenticity. You manage them and you handle them. You address them. You do your best. You don't have to apologize, by the way. You don't have to go, well, I didn't do a very good job. No. Everybody knows getting valid research is hard. Everybody knows reliability is hard to achieve. Everybody worries about really being authentic. Did I get the authentic thoughts of my informants? Accept your research won't be perfect. Accept that that's okay. And then state how you're going to address these problems. You're going to do your best. Don't worry, just state how you address them. And then sampling. Okay, again, look at the epistemological approach. If you're a positivist, you might use convenience sampling. I mean, I can't think of anybody more positivist in this department than Sue Sprecher, who does personal relationships, and she uses convenience sampling over and over and over. And she adjusts for it. It's a problem. It's not perfect. And she doesn't apologize for it. She does great research. Non-probability sampling, not ideal. You know what? She still gets some great results. We still gain understanding. So, lots of students mention doing probability sampling without a sampling frame. You can do that with cluster sampling, though nobody mentioned cluster sampling. A number of you mentioned systematic random sampling, but at the very least you need a population count. And ideally, you do have a sampling frame. You don't have to have a sampling frame, but you should have a population count. You really should. Just how many people. But it's even more important to know that qualitative researchers, again, almost never use probability sampling. And at least one, and maybe two or three said, I'm going to use probability sampling and I'm going to do qualitative research. No, that's so rare. And in an undergraduate project where it's your first time, I would advise against it. Okay. Target population. Who are you trying to understand? Somebody was talking about white prejudice and they were going to research black people. And I think I said, no, actually, you're trying to understand white people because you're trying to understand prejudice, white people's prejudice against black people. So your target population is actually white people because you're trying to explain their thoughts. You really need to be careful about who you're trying to understand, who you're trying to explain. That's your target population. At this point, you say, I'm going to do blah, blah. And a lot of you did just fine on this. Somebody said snowball sampling for interviews. Perfect. That was great. But do explain why. And time and money limitations, I don't know, a sentence or two will do. It's pretty obvious. You're an undergrad. Many of you are deep in the hole in debt anyway. You don't have any money to do the research. You've got a semester to do the research. State that. So the data analysis method. Once you gather all this data, how are you going to crunch it? It's pretty straightforward. In the paragraph, in the prompt, I give a number of possibilities. Pick one of those, or if I've missed one or two from the book, pick another one. That's okay. And finally, not finally, the goal. What's your goal? What are you trying to explain? Trying to explain racism in traffic stops, or racism in schooling, or why students avoid sociology, or non-traditional students. What are some of the problems non-traditional students have in the sociology major? That was one of the proposals. Great proposal. Remember, you're going to study a sample. You're not doing a census, you're doing a sample. Or you're going to try to use the sample to make larger statements about the population. Most of you will, but a few of you won't, and that's okay if you won't. Explain why. And then finally, for the research design section, ethics. A lot of you missed this. What harm could you do to your research subjects? What harm could you do to them? One of the students worried about the ethical or unethical behavior of the research subjects. Forget about them. You're not responsible for them. You're responsible for yourself. Your job is not to harm them as you research them. Or if you're going to harm them, you minimize it as much as possible and you do them as much good as possible. Or you harm the actual people you research for a much larger benefit for society in general. That's the creepiest one, but sometimes it happens. And you missed a lot of the possible harms. A lot of this, I mean, if you're talking about racism, this is not some neutral topic. It's emotionally damaging. It hurts. It's enraging. It's frustrating. Raising this issue really might blow people up. They might blow up. It might be really upsetting for them. You need to acknowledge that. Um, Picking a major. Parents are sometimes jerks. You will not pick a social major. That's a bullshit major. You can't get a job. And the student herself really wants to study society. That's emotionally upsetting. You could be doing harm to people when you are researching them. Are you doing financial harm? Are you doing reputational harms? More than one of you said that students were worried about blowback if they complained about specific professors. And Maria Schmeckley and her students project last spring. And you're thinking about doing roughly the same thing this fall. And so majors might be reticent to talk to you. So you need to uh, guarantee them, or not guarantee, but get close to guaranteeing confidentiality. So what are the possible harms? Reputational, emotional. What are you responsible for? State that. And again, not perfection. You're going to do your best. All right. So the conclusion should be a restatement of the introduction. It's a wrap up. It's kind of a mirror of the introduction, though it can be a little shorter. The back matter, the appendix. If you're going to do a qualitative survey, have some questions in the appendix. If you're going to do interviews, have what's called an interview schedule in the appendix. And an interview schedule is a list of interview questions. And for the love of all that is holy, make them open-ended questions. Please include no questions with yes, no answers. If your question leads to a yes or a no, it's a bad question. That just kills your research. You're not going to find out anything. You want to ask open-ended questions where they tell you stuff you never even expected. You didn't know it existed. You didn't know people thought that way. You're learning something new. If you're going to have a quantitative survey, put that here. Get your Likert scales out. But the appendix is not required. If you're going to use secondary data, okay, just say I'm going to use secondary data from ICPSR. I'm going to use the General Social Survey. I'm going to use census data, etc. The bibliography, of course, is required. And please get the formatting right. Last name, first name, year, article or chapter title, journal or book title in italics. Remember, the larger work gets italicized, the smaller one does not. That was the biggest mistake. Really, get the formatting right, because what the formatting is a form of information. If you italicize something, automatically people know it's a journal. Or if you italicize it, they automatically know it's a book. And if you put it up front, it's the last name. You know that's the last name of the author. When you put the year, you put just some 4 digits that seem plausibly like the last century. They know it's a year. So think of a bibliography as the formatting itself as providing information. The other thing is, again, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. You might think that getting the formatting right is some bullshit requirement that you're going to totally shine on once you leave college. Well, you're going to run into formatting whenever you deal with paper the rest of your life. And organizations want things formatted their way. You write a grant proposal, you don't format it their way, they're going to say no and they won't give you the money. You write an application to grad school and you don't format it that way, they won't let you in. Learn to start formatting it the way organizations want it. And a whole discipline of sociology has learned this formatting, because the formatting, as I said, is a way of providing information. Just learn it. And by the way, please don't use URLs. Please don't put those in. You need, for a journal article, you need the name, the date, the article title, the journal title, and the volume, issue, and page numbers. That's all you need. You don't need a long URL or downloaded from, you really don't. Sorry if this was hyper cranky. I really want you to get as much out of this as you can. I hope I've filled this with awareness of you graduating and you getting a good job. And I'm very aware from teaching 300 this semester, they are graduating this semester into the worst economy possibly the United States has ever had. And at the beginning of the semester, it was the best. One of the best, really. It was one of the best in January and May. It's one of the worst ever, possibly worse than the Great Depression. And you're probably saying, thanks very much for reminding me. Well, I'm doing my best to equip you with tools so that when you graduate in December, or one or two of you in next May, you'll have an advantage because I want you to do well. And I've done my best to give you examples that are full of this current crisis to show you that research, there's a reason our society and all societies rely so much on material or social research. And I want you to be equipped to at least read that research and make sense of it. Aside from that, good luck. I'm available by email. As I said, the deadlines are a little flexible. I got to turn grades in Tuesday at noon, so that is rigid. But try to get everything in Friday night. If not, please email me. And good luck.